This video is sponsored by Game Toppers. Turn your own kitchen or dining room table into a premium portable game solution at a fraction of the cost. Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 775. Today we're going to talk about Undaunted Battle of Britain. It's a two-player game from David Thompson and Trevor Benjamin. I think it's the fourth in the series of the Undaunted series, published by Osprey Games. And this one's a little bit different because it takes place in the sky. So instead of foot soldiers in a little skirmish match, you're going to be navigating different types of aircraft over, I think it's 10 different scenarios. And you can play that as a campaign or as a bunch of one-offs, if you will. It retains a lot of the core mechanics of the original Undaunted games, but there's some little nuances and around the edges there, to accommodate air combat and so on. And there's also like boats and anti-aircraft cannon and some other stuff like that I'll show you when we get down to the table. So let's go take a look and I'll come back and tell you what I think. Okay, here we've got the board set up, and this particular scenario is scenario 6. So you can see it's made up of these different little hex spaces. You can see you've got some cloud cover, some fog. There's some different aircraft that you can see here. It comes to the tip there, which kind of shows you the point, sort of line of sight of the aircraft. We've got another squad of aircraft over there, some over here, and you've got some of these balloons that get in the way, and the aircraft will basically just be destroyed if they ever fly into that. And then you've got some boats here, you can see like around there, and then around the edges on the shore in this particular scenario we've got some anti-aircraft gun. So I set this particular scenario up to kind of give you a little bit of a flavor of just about everything that's in the game. The game kind of stages you into kind of new mechanics and new features over the course of the different scenarios. So each scenario will have a setup like this, tells you which cards and airplanes to add into your deck as well as into your supply, just like the original. It gives you the board setup. And these tiles are pretty cool because they have this kind of double-sided things. All of them I think are ocean on some sides, and then particular tiles will represent different buildings and land features and so on the other side. Some of the battles are like all over the ocean. Some are like barely a little bit of ocean, then lots of land, and then kind of this one's kind of half and half almost. Now you can see here on this side it tells you which cards are going to start in your deck and in your supply. So we'll take a look here at the British, and you can see they've got 4 cards in the supply, 4 types of cards, also their discord cards, and then we've got their starting deck here like so with some discord, some of the cards that you see there in the supply, and then some other these like comms cards which you can see there. Now in this particular scenario these also got a ships card and an anti-aircraft card, and these are particular only to certain scenarios and only for the British in this case. And then we've got a similar setup over there for the Germans. Now it's very, very similar to Undaunted, where you'll be playing a card and you'll activate that particular unit. On this case, so you can see we have B2 and then the B ace here with the little star, and you're always going to at least move them one space, and then you may take a maneuver or an attack action. Now the maneuver action is basically just turning your aircraft, and you have to do that after you've moved at least one hex. So you'll move a hex, turn, move a hex and turn, or you can move 2 hexes and turn. But the ace, you can see they have a little star there and the star on their maneuver. That means they can actually turn before they've done any movement. Now they still have to move at least one of these spaces, up to 3 in this case, but they're a little bit more skilled of a pilot. Now as your aircraft starts to take damage, you'll start to take cards out of your discard pile, out of your hand, and out of the deck, and they'll go back into here. If you ever take damage, I think I said that in the wrong order, out of your hand, then your discard pile, then your deck. And then if you take damage again, there's no more in your deck or hand or anything, then that aircraft will be removed from the game, and then these cards will go out of the game. And similar to the other Undaunted, you can do, let's see, you can do a bolster action. So this is specific to the B section. You can do a guide, which is just move an aircraft one space. Inspire is to copy another B card. So if I played this one, I could do a maneuver with B2 and then play this one again and use B2. Then you have the coordinate, which is the ability to remove these discord cards out of your deck. Now the way that you get the discord cards is just like the other Undaunted, you have the initiative phase where both players will take one of the 4 cards in their hand and then simultaneously reveal it. If you reveal one with this symbol above it, so not all of them have that, but if you reveal one with that symbol and all of the aircraft in this section are not in comms, then you're going to acquire a new discard card. Similarly, if you play an action here that has this symbol, like if you tried to bolster or guide or inspire, then and they are not in comms, then you will also take a discard card. I'll explain what comms is in a second. And then also, if they are not in comms and there's this symbol, that means you cannot do this action. You cannot do a coordinate action, which again is to remove discard cards. So that's kind of the gist of how the deck works, which is basically like the original Undaunted plus the comms thing. So we'll talk about comms now. Now, this is the unit that we were just talking about, the B unit. Now, currently these two aircraft are in comms. If there is only one hex in between them, they're still in comms, but if they get further apart, which can and likely will happen, then they're considered out of comms. So it behooves you to kind of keep these guys grouped up here. Now, there might be opportunities where you want to kind of have somebody stray away, maybe make an attack of opportunity on target or something like that. But you got to kind of weigh that with staying in comms and theoretically, you know, accruing more discord cards into your deck, which is just going to fatten up your deck with a bunch of nothing cards. Now let's talk a quick little movement in combat scenario here. So let's say we had played here this B2 card here for the Spitfire 2, okay? And we're trying to, let me zoom in here, and attack this other fellow over here, which is actually a bomber. Okay, so when we attack, we want to be as close as we can. So again, you have to move. So let's say we do a move, and then maybe even we'll do a move again, and then we're going to use our attack. So when you make an attack, you're trying to beat this number here, which you can see, if it focuses, is a 6. Now, if for some reason we weren't able to get in the same hex, you start to add hexes to that 6. So now we're 1 hex away, so that would be a 7. So we're going to then use one of two numbers on our attack, either the left number or the better number on the right, which is kind of in that pinkish red. Now, because we're kind of in the aircraft's rear, which is these 3 hexes behind the back of the plane, we're going to go ahead and use that larger number of the 3. So that just means this is the number of dice that we roll, 3 dice. And we're trying in this case to get equal to or 7. So we're going to roll that. Here we got a 7 there. And in that case, it would be a hit. So they would go ahead and remove one of their cards either from their hand, discard pile, or deck. And again, if that was the last, if there were no more cards left in there, then this would come off. Now, there are similar things that you might do like on a bombing run. So this particular one here is bomber. So this is G2 here. So if it had flown up over this boat up at the top, you can see they have the special action of bomb, and they'll just roll the 2 dice there. And then you always have to be in the same hex, so you're just going to be rolling for that defense. If there's other aircraft that are in the way, so if I was trying to take this shot here, like so, with this guy in the back here, so I'd be 1, 2, 3 extra defense. So I'd be trying to roll a 9 in that case. And then, for example, you have these other hexes here. You've got the cloud cover and then the balloons there. Those add +2 instead of +1. And again, it's worth noting that you may, if you ever did fly into one of these, then your aircraft would be just initially or immediately eliminated. Let's see, a couple other things here. So sometimes aircraft will get taken out of action like so you flip them over to the stripe side. Now they may start the scenario off, maybe they're grounded and they haven't taken off yet. So to get them, you can't do anything with that aircraft until you play this card that matches them. And when you play that card, all you can do is basically flip that up to activate it. So now it's ready to be activated and played on later card plays or later turns. Now when you make a hit with anti-aircraft guns, which we're just going to look at over here, whoops, there we go. Which again, it can be bombed and taken out. But there's a card that will activate the anti-aircraft guns and it uses the same kind of line of sight and everything. But if you get a hit with one of those, the only thing it's going to do, it's not going to do any damage or take any cards of the deck, but it will go ahead and ground that or deactivate that to be activated. So the idea is that you're kind of like, swerving and, trying to avoid all the flak in the sky. And so it's worth noting that each of the scenarios will have different objectives. Sometimes it'll be eliminate specific aircraft or specific things like the ships, or you might have the ships escape. So if we take a look at here, you can see the arrows on the ships. So when the RAF plays their ship cards, they can choose and move their ships each one space. So they move very, very slowly, kind of one time through the deck. But part of the objective will be to get them to maybe escape there off the edge of the map. That could be one of the objectives of the scenario. And the scenarios get more and more complex, and they add these features. You won't start with ships or balloons or anti-aircraft guns or cloud cover or anything like that in your first scenario. Just be kind of a simple dogfight, and then you kind of build your way up to, as the name of the game says, the Battle of Britain with this great big map and scenario. That's pretty much the gist. Okay, so that's Undaunted Battle of Britain. It's only a 2-player game. Normally I do my 3 pillars of review. Player count, only 2 players. Play time, what's the box say? Probably an hour. 45 to 60. Yeah, and that's about how long it takes, about an hour per scenario. The first couple are actually quicker than that, so that's probably at the 45-minute length. I haven't played the final scenario, but I've taken a look at it, and I can see that going over an hour for sure. But I played all the way up through number 6, which I was showing you there. And yeah, it starts to get about an hour, you know, once you get into like the, I don't know, the third one or so, and then it's about an hour. And so my last pillar is always, you know, what do I compare this to? Obviously you would compare it to the other Undaunted games. I will say this, I played all the others except for Stalingrad, which they didn't send me for some reason, which is fine. No big deal. They sent me this one, which makes me happy. And I've heard a lot of people say Stalingrad is the best one out of the series. Now, I have not played that one. I would say this one is the best one of the series. The reason for me is this. I think the others are great. They're fine. They're perfect. Everything. It's this one. I really like this one. It's a kind of a personal thing. But Undaunted, the Normandy, and the others are great. But I have Combat Commander Europe. Now, you know, I don't want to split hairs here, but it's like, Undaunted is great, but I know what I have with Combat Commander, which is a little bit more crunchy in depth, you know, and chaotic and cinematic and stuff like that. And so when I'm playing a miniature kind of tactical skirmish game with a squad and all that stuff, I kind of like, I'm missing Combat Commander, which if you watch my top 50 games of all time, you know it's in there. So it's already a personal favorite. So for me, like to sort of choose to play one of the other Undaunteds versus that is like not going to happen. Even though I think objectively, you know, if you want to say that, it's a great game. And I've really enjoyed it. And I've not played Stalingrad. This one has all that great stuff, which I really love about Undaunted, and then does it to the aircraft stuff, which I don't really usually like flying games. I did like X-Wing when it was out, and I played it for a while, and you know, it was good and it was fine. Some of these other games, because the flying games can kind of feel like boat games where you're kind of like sailing and just like, you know, maneuvering, and even though you're supposed to be flying like dog pilots style combat, it feels kind of slow and stuff like that. This doesn't feel like that, and I would say easily this is my favorite of that kind of dogfighty aerial combat game, easily. And there's 2 reasons for that. And I talked a little bit about them in the kind of the game overview and the walkthrough. And the first one is that sort of enforced movement. Like you've always kind of at least have to drift. Like the momentum of your plane is at least carrying you one space. So you always have to kind of account for where you will kind of end up. And then each of the aircrafts has like a different amount of maneuverability and stuff like that. So if you kind of go hard on one that's not really great at maneuvering, it's going to take them a long time, like a couple of turns to kind of bank and come back, which I think is really fitting for the aircraft at the time, because these things didn't like turn on a dime, and they weren't, you know, these high-powered jet Mach 3 jets. You know, these were, you know, kind of old school aircraft. So you have to kind of take that in mind. And the other thing to think about with that movement is, and it plays nicely, kind of dovetails nicely with the whole comms idea, because you, as much as you can try to, you want to keep those squads grouped up, because otherwise you're going to start to accrue the Discord cards, which is going to, you know, fatten up your deck with a bunch of junk. You don't want that. But there always are going to be opportunities for you to try to go after and say like, well, I've got to go after, you know, this guy because I know I'm going to have a good shot at this guy, and I need to do that. And so you might take yourself out of comms, maybe temporarily, but there's a really great kind of juggling act, balancing act with that whole kind of idea. And that's the other part of it is kind of that, you know, line of sight, sort of setting up sort of those aerial traps, you know, for things. And when you start to get to the later scenarios, this is really, it really kicks in, because in a way, one of the things that I miss when I play like the aerial games that I really like with the, you know, skirmishy tabletop games, is terrain, right? And so the space here, especially as you move into the first couple scenarios after the first two, there is like a feeling of terrain on the board, and that just adds into those other two layers I talked about, the movement and the comms thing. So you're trying to keep things in sync, you're trying to keep you from like drifting off course, but then you've got obstacles in the way, and these balloons, and you know, you hide behind cloud cover, and you've got like the boat targets or the bombing things you have to go and do, the stuff you got to bomb on the ground. And so all of that stuff starts to really sort of spiral in on itself, but it doesn't really add any kind of complexity to the mechanics. It's still that same kind of very elegant and simple Undaunted mechanics. So yeah, to me this is just the easy recommend. You know, I'm not having played Stalingrad, but to me this is like, oh, this system was actually built for this style game, not the skirmish game, which it was totally built for that skirmish game. But it just like, oh, a happily accident, it actually works, in my opinion, better for this than the skirmish stuff. And it's just really great, because this is not really the kind of game that it's the kind of game that I want to enjoy, I want to like, and like I kind of like it on paper. But this is the first time like really like where the rubber meets the road or the tarmac, and you know, everything works out. So I can't recommend it enough. Undaunted Battle of Britain. It's got the same simple, easy to get into, accessible gameplay as the other Undaunted games. And then by the time you're like halfway through the book, like I am, you're just gonna be like, oh wow, this is so great. So I can't wait to play like the big battle at the end, you know. And it's got a like real simple campaign system, which is really neat too, which, I mean, I haven't been playing with that, but really, really cool. So definitely recommend. Thanks.